I'm filming.
Wait, what?
It's when you extend it, I think it's like a 2-year max. And then if you don't have a drop or a sponsor, then it's like 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
And you just kind of like,
I obviously wouldn't say it, but I wasn't sure I was going to have the first time.
no, but you gotta make sure that,
Like,
because some
I'm not
companies
saying
are
this
really weird about sponsors. And like, maybe like, your residency can get a little off. But apparently, yeah, some companies are really weird about that. They're not gonna.
Oh, I mean, again, I'm not going to say how it would work out with you.
Yeah. Especially because I never know that I really need it for the first time like that. It's also one of the things where, let's say you do stay and you do like a full 2 years, if you leave and then try to come back again, it's very difficult.
Well, I was wondering, like, yeah, can you leave the actual country? Like, can I like go in that 2 years if I want to travel?
Whenever and then it's our visa, we're not supposed to be out of here for
So I've centered the clay. Now I'm going to start opening it up. There's a slight difference in this to a cylinder in that once we've sort of put the hole in, we don't straighten the fingers up, we keep them sort of flat in the base, so as you're opening out you're sort of pulling the clay out and up like this, so you get a nice curve into the interior of the base of the pot. So if I was doing a cylinder I'd be straight in, but because I'm doing a bowl, using the curvature of my fingers to pull out the base and up towards the bottom. So working back down to the base, compressing the clay and shaping it into a nice curved interior. Sponge over the fingers, finish that off. So now I'm going to lift it in the same way that I would a cylinder. Get all that weight up into the wall. I'm not going to let the rim get too thin because it's going to have to stretch open into a bowl. Undercutting the base to get access to the excess weight. Squeezing that weight into the wall. Slowly coming up the outside of the pot. When I'm lifting, I'm trying to get my throwing rings quite small, looking more like the grooves on a record than a sort of visible spiral. Keeps consistency in the wall and stops you getting weak spots. So if this was a cylinder I would have been collaring it, but because it's a bowl I've allowed it to flare out a little bit. But I keep it upright so I can get the majority of the weight up into the wall. And then rather than try to throw it out, I'm gonna stretch it out. So you get the thin effect of the wall of the pot without having to throw it thin, stretch it thin. So to do that I'm going to do it in 3 stages. The first time I'm going to go about 1/3 of the way to where I intend it to end up, which is over here. So 1/3, and then 2/3, and then the final one. And the hand on the inside is pushing against that rib on the outside and following that curve in the air. Before we get to that, I'm just going to tidy up the base a little bit. Well, I've got good access to that. that off a little bit. So as the ball opens out over the top, you've got a nice turn back into a squarish foot, which will save you time in the trimming. So I want water on the inside, but not particularly large amount on the outside. Start stretching. As you get towards the rim will turn in over my hand. The key thing is not to panic at that stage, to see it through. And follow your fingers and the profile on the outside. 2/3. Dries out towards the rim as it starts to stretch, so apply some more water on the inside. And final stretch. Take out the excess water from the inside. Use a sponge just to rub up the inside to clean up the wall for the first time. Now we're going to get back in there with a metal kidney. Where I sort of differ from most potters is that when we're working on the outside, we're always working on the right hand side with the clay pulling off the rib. But when you're on the inside, if you're working on that side, you have to have the ribs facing away from you, and you're sort of hinge bound by your wrist. So I work back towards myself with my right hand on the left hand inside, so that the clay's still pulling off, but I've got more dexterity in my wrist. Stretching, curving the metal kidney, getting right in to that original curve that we put in the centering process, in the opening up process. Following that up the wall, taking away all the slurry, evening out the throwing lines, and drying the surface of the clay, which encourages even drying after it comes off the wheel.
Would you be able to speak up a tiny bit, just because it's loud in here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm happy with the curve on the inside, and that's the most important part. Anything that's on the outside, if there's a little bulge somewhere or something, that can be turned off later. If I start trying to push that back in at this stage, I'm going to end up with what I call a spare tire on the inside of there. So I'm conscious of the outside profile, but I'm more concerned about the internal profile in the throwing, because I've got time to alter the external profile in the trimming. See now that where we straightened up the base before we opened the bowl out, we've created a nice foot down to the bottom. Put a little undercut under there so we can get the wire through. And we've got a dry pot because it's been scraped off with the metal tools. And make dry hands and then lift the pot onto a pot board. I'll move this better? So I'm using a serrated wire which pulls a little bit of air between the pot and the wheel head, helps it separate. clean and dry hands. Holding right from the base, nowhere near the rim. I lift from one side and roll it so it comes off. Misshapes in my hands slightly. Pop it down onto the board and it retakes its shape. And if there's any sort of movement in there, I allow that to stay because I think that's a nice sort of bit of history of the pot, some maker's marks.